And the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stanislaus, there was an article by the Associated Press back on August 20th in which the article says that the EPA is now downplaying the danger of the Colorado mine spill, but concerns linger that the contamination levels are pretty serious. Yet the EPA says that the contamination levels were returning to pre-spill levels and no longer threatens the rivers. Do you agree with that? Is that the EPA's position?
Well, EPA put in place an aggressive data program working with everyone in Unified Command. That includes the state, the tribes, and all the local governments. We then went through a laboratory process and then compared that to pre-existing levels and made a judgment. Once we achieved pre-existing levels, we communicated that in Unified Command, and then the local governments made a decision about reopening the river.
Mm-hmm. The AP article also said that they made repeated requests to the EPA for information on pre-spill contamination so that they obviously could compare that to the current contamination levels. At the time of the article, the EPA had failed to respond to that request. Has the EPA provided that information?
Yeah, it is on our website where we have tables and graphs and the actual data that compares the data taken on various days to pre-spill conditions and other parameters.
So was it on your website at around August 15th to 20th time frame? Was it there then?
Yeah, I don't have the article in front of me. I don't know what particular time frame they were talking about.
The article was on August 20th.
Yeah, but as soon as we could collect and process the data, we posted it on our website. I mean, clearly there is a laboratory process, particularly with metals. It takes the time to analyze that, but as soon as we had that data available, we not only posted it on our press, but more immediately we communicated with state and local and tribal officials.
Okay. Are you satisfied with the levels of contamination of arsenic and lead and other contaminants that are currently in the river? Is that consistent with what you require from private companies in terms of wastewater discharge?
Well, what we addressed was whether the river has been restored to pre-spill conditions. However, the Animas River Stakeholder Group and others here at Colorado had long recognized that there was a whole load of contaminants going into the river, and that is the reason why I was in Silverton just last week at the request of local communities to examine the possibility of a long-term solution through a Superfund, a potential listing.
But you've approved it for recreational use again, and based on your analysis of the contaminants in the river, yet other health agencies have advised people not to drink the water and not to basically come in contact with the soil. That seems to me to be inconsistent with a water source being ready for recreational use. I mean, here's the problem I've got with this, and the EPA plays an important role, and I've been a vocal critic of the EPA. My problem with this is there appears to be a double standard. It's been mentioned several times here. If this had been a private company, I don't think the EPA would share the same optimism if this had been a private company. I don't think the EPA would have handled them the same way the EPA has handled itself in regard to Mr. Johnson's video and the obvious alterations to the video. I think it's problematic that the EPA is not doing the due diligence and investigating this and handling this the way they would if it were a private company. I mean, Mr. Babin mentioned a rancher in Texas. There's a guy, I think, in Wyoming who built a pond, and they're finding him, what, $37,000 a day? I just don't see I see a real problem here with the way the EPA handles this, and everything's fine, look the other way, there's nothing going on here, but you wouldn't do the same thing if it were a private company. You would destroy the company.
Well, all I can say is that from a transparency, taking responsibility for the spill, we've done. I mean, you know, EPA is involved in thousands of contaminated sites around the country. I take that responsibility very seriously. I want to make sure, because communities and states ask us to be involved because of the public health and environmental dimension of that problem. I want to make sure that work is done, because ultimately, I think we all want to address the conditions that resulted in local communities asking us to provide assistance. So I am committed to learning the lessons from this site as well as others.
That's what we all want. That's what we want for Durango. That's what we want for the Navajo Nation. That's what we want in every community in the country, every municipality that is under an enormous burden imposed by the EPA. And it appears to me, Mr. Chairman, that there is a double standard. I've gone over my time. I yield the balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. And